Hey everyone, and welcome to Stitching Tales, a podcast about all things sewing and what it's really like to run a sewing business. I am Johanna Lundström of The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena Hjerpe of Hazelhen Patterns.
And today we have our first ever guest on the podcast. Welcome Emily Hundt from In the Folds.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was so nice. We're very honored that you wanted to be our first ever guest. And the reason that we wanted
I was your first ever guest, but I feel extra privileged now I know that.
Yeah, we're very picky about the guests because we definitely... So this was the first time we're like, this is someone we really want to take on and talk to you about the things that we also talk a lot about, which is running a sewing business. And... a while back, I think last fall, you started writing about this on your Substack, Beyond the Folds. But first of all, we would love to get to know you a little bit better. I know a lot of people listening already are familiar with you, but if you could tell us a little bit of your backstory, how you started in the Folds, and where you are right now in your business.
Okay, big question. So I started my business in 2015. I'm based in Sydney in Australia. And I studied fashion design, so I'm a pattern maker, and I kind of stumbled upon the home sewing world, the indie home sewing world a few years before that, and was just so excited because I kind of thought I was going to have to work in fashion design, and I didn't really want to. I was feeling really upset about the amount of waste in the fashion industry, and also the fashion industry in Sydney and Australia is quite small. And I was living in the UK at the time and came across a few brands and realized there was kind of this alternate path. So when I moved back to Sydney, I started In the Folds. And I did actually plan for In the Folds to also make women's wear. I thought I would also run it as a fashion business as well as a sewing business. But that never happened. I kind of almost forgot about it, I want to say. I just got so interested in the sewing side of it, the pattern side of it. So I've been doing it for about 10 years and kind of tried everything. I feel like I'd done printed patterns, which I've recently decided to put a stop to. I had a subscription called Curated that ran for the last 4 years, which I've also just ended. Because the home sewing world, as you both know, changes a lot, and we're constantly adapting to it, which I sometimes feel like I'm not adapting quickly enough, that I'm a bit slow, because when you've been running a business for this long, you kind of, you just naturally do what you were doing without questioning it sometimes. And I also think I'm also very busy, so often I don't come up for air, so I don't really notice what's happening outside of me. And as you mentioned, I started a Substack maybe 6 months ago, just as I was feeling really burnt out and didn't know where to go with my business. So it was kind of a way to explore that and understand that more. For some reason, I wanted to do that publicly, which I am enjoying, but I can't remember. I think, I started the Substack more to talk about motherhood, because I have a toddler. I'm a 3-year-old. So I think my relationship with my business has changed a lot in the last 3 years. So I was kind of interested in those conversations that I felt like I wasn't having in my personal life or in my business life, that it was kind of expected that just business goes on as usual when really everything behind the scenes has completely changed. And as I started talking about that, it kind of infiltrated everything, and I became interested in talking about business, creativity, motherhood, kind of everything that makes In the Folds what it is, I guess.
So what, because if you go back a little bit, because I'm a little bit curious about the workings of your business. How do you work alone? Do you have contractors? Do you have employees? I mean, how big is In the Folds behind the scenes, so to speak?
That's a good question. Right now, we're quite small. It's just me and a communications assistant, which I would say is my current sweet spot. I'm really happy with that. Just the two of us, really nice. Last year, we were bigger. We had, at one stage, 4 of us. And nothing wrong with the people I employed. It was more, I am not a great manager of that many people. I felt like that I was always being asked for something and I was letting people down constantly. I felt like I could never like keep up and people were always waiting for me, and that must have been frustrating. And then I use a lot of contractors. So I have some great relationships with contractors I've used for years. So I use a contractor for like a pattern grading for both the regular size range and then a separate person for the extended size range. I have someone who does our illustrations. I have an editor. I have fit models. I think that's everything. But I might think of someone else. But yeah, they're my like go-to regular contractors who are part of like the chain when I produce a pattern.
So you do have a lot of help, and you did make a post about the financials of producing a sewing pattern, which I think was very illuminating. We're definitely going to link to that as well, because it does give some perspective, just the people that you listed now that you need in order to actually put something out, because it's pretty much impossible to do it all yourself, because most of us are not like Swiss Army knives to being able to do like being a designer, being a pattern maker, being a great photographer, being a graphic designer, being a business economics person. Like it's a lot of different hats to wear and run social media and all the other content sides of the business. So, but it's interesting because I can imagine, but you are like the face of your business, right? So when we see you or when you do tutorials and teachings, it's Emily, right? Because you have not like built up a system around this. So what has this been like being in the folds, Emily in the folds are like almost the same thing, I guess, from us, you know, watching and being consumer of your things.
Yeah, I think that's something I like struggle with a lot, because I actually don't like being the face of anything. When I was studying fashion design, I realized I was interested in being a pattern maker and the behind the scenes side, and that I actually didn't need my name in lights. And then I happened to choose this path that naturally you become the face of your business unless you're a much bigger business. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because I have noticed like some other of the bigger brands who started around the same time as me or a little bit before are doing a good job of phasing themselves out as the face. Like if you think of like Closet Core, for example, as they've expanded, Heather Lou has done a really good job of bringing other like external people in. I think Seamwork has done a good job of it as well, because otherwise like the business has nowhere to move, I guess, or grow if this founder ever wants to step out. But I don't have that kind of infrastructure. So I'm just me. So I haven't really thought too much about it. Sometimes people say like, what would happen if you wanted to sell the business? But I actually can't imagine that you can sell a business that is so much you and your face and who you are. So you probably do spend like a long time before even considering that, of trying to phase yourself out. And I'm not sure my customers would be interested in that. Like so much of the relationships are based on me being an actual person and the trust that brings, I guess.
And I think when you shop from a small business, it's usually more you shop the relationship. Like it becomes more personal for me as a customer if I know who I'm buying from. So I don't think it's a weakness at all or a hinder. I think it could be a strength for a small business, that it is more personal for you.
Yeah, I think so too, except without like my small team, I would be really failing on this front. Like they really, like my communications assistant, her name's Courtney, she'll be like, we need to talk about this thing, you need to talk to the camera right now, and I'm putting it on social media. And that is good, because otherwise if I was left to my own devices, like you wouldn't actually see my face very often. And I've just had to learn to like trust the system. We'll just do it very quickly, send it off, not look back at it, not like overly polish things, because otherwise I won't do it. So like when I've been thinking about where In the Folds is going, a lot of people like, you know, make an online course, do video content, blah, blah, blah. But like that would take me the rest of my life, because I am so awkward and uncomfortable about doing that it just wouldn't be a good investment for my business. Like, I really love creating tutorials, but they're done like on Illustrator. I just spend the time illustrating, using my words. That bit I really enjoy. But with a camera in my face, I'm not so good, basically, or not so comfortable.
Yeah, because you and I talk a lot about this too, Malena. I think we can definitely relate to it. Because, the pull of the realizing that in order to grow your business, you have to be very present with your face. And we have different levels of comfort with that. And because I think I am a person that is really comfortable with the camera. I kind of enjoy it, but still it burns me out sometimes because I have to be on so much. And I think for you, Malena, you have a little bit more like not really want to like push that kind of presence onto.
Yeah, as you said, I'm a pattern maker as well. We work behind the scenes. We are not, well, I can't speak for all pattern makers, but usually, I mean, we're not be on stage, like, yeah, being the face out. It's more comfortable working behind the scene. And I just now watched my Instagram. I haven't made a post since Black Friday. So I kind of need that person who says like, okay, you need to post something right now about this. Just do it. Otherwise, yeah, it kind of falls in between the
100%.
chairs.
Yeah, and that would be me if I didn't have someone telling me to do it. I would just ignore it. Because I also don't even actually use Instagram myself, so I don't have that prompt of being on there to look at it. So I really do need someone telling me what we need. And I had a whole hiatus from Instagram, but I guess soon after my daughter was born, and I like didn't even understand what a reel was. And then I went back on, and like my team kept telling me I had to make reels, but I didn't really understand why. And then I went on and realized how much the platform had changed and how literally everything was a video.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my gosh, this is how older generations must feel constantly. And like, I'm only in my late 30s and I already feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting phased out of this technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, the train has left the station. I also like struggle with reels and like carousel. People are talking about before you realize that what things actually are. So yeah, I hear you. I can relate. Yes, on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely, to me, I have like bouts because, as I said, I can be quite comfortable with the camera and I can have lots of ideas around content and enjoy the video process. But I noticed that it also drains my energy, and that's because you have to like preserve, because we're running a business. So if you like empty your tank, a lot of other stuff will suffer as well, which I think to me is the biggest struggle, because it's too many things that you have to be on top of. And so I think also the one, it sounds really good that you say that, Emily, that you have someone telling you, because that takes off some mental load from you, because you just have to follow instructions. And I think in being a business owner, you're so much the driver of every decision. I think that can be really taxing for your energy. So finding places where you don't have to be the driver, I think that's probably, it sounds like a really smart idea. And I've also had help for a while now, but she quit because she had other stuff to do, got another job and everything. But it was very nice. But what I did notice when I had help was that I stepped away even more from Instagram, because just like you, I never scroll on Instagram. And my pastime, people says they DM me to my personal account, and like, you can't DM me because on Instagram, because I'm never there. You have to like, I do use Messenger and WhatsApp and text, but you can't like invite me or like show me some clip on Instagram because I want. So, and having to like balance all those ways of communications as well, I can imagine for you too. Like customer support and checking DMs and things like that. It's a lot for a small business.
And that's where I think it's not only just having a team, but also like trusting the person you've hired to they can have autonomy. So I think I've got quite good at that over the years, is like just being like, okay, this is on your plate now and it's now your responsibility. It's no longer mine. And then therefore, like, I'm not a micromanager. I think I would be if people were doing the part of the job that I love the most. You know, like if someone was writing the instructions, because I really enjoy that. That's really important to me. If someone else was doing it, I probably would be going over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it was correct. But say it's social media, like that is not my, you know, I'm not good at it. I don't understand it. I've definitely, like, you know, missed the boat in terms of relearning it. So Connie can make the strategy. She'll tell me specifically what kind of post she wants, and I'll just do it, and then I'll leave it up to her to do the rest. And I think that's like the whole mental load you're talking about. Like there's no point getting help if you're going to micromanage and make all the decisions. Exactly. You just have to trust, you know, trust you've hired the right person, and trust, like, let them have autonomy as well, because there probably is nothing worse than being hired by someone who's constantly checking up on you and questioning your decision. So I think there's that aspect that helps as well. But maybe I'm just tired. That's why I think I'm better at just That's okay. Being like... You
also mentioned, you know, in passing your family situation, that you're also a parent to 2 small children. And I mean, that's also...
Well, one and one on the way.
One on the way. Right. Oh, congratulations. But also, it's gonna... We have kids as well. I mean... I can say that from the perspective of someone who has grown kids. So mine I have to think now because they're so old. I have one that just turned 27, and then I have one who is turning 24 now. So I have gotten back so much time. So I'm on the other side of that, but I do remember, because I also ran a business when I was, you know, like in your situation. So I can imagine that has also affected your thoughts regarding, you know, running a sustainable business and trying to figure this out as well in this season of your life.
For sure. I think that has been the biggest change for me, because I used to be happy to just work all the time. I loved it. I still love my work, but I didn't care about it bleeding into every other part of my life. My partner is also a creative. He's in a band, so he was also doing stuff on the sidelines of his 9-to-5 job. So it was kind of normal that we would work on weekends and all of that. But then we had my daughter, and, well, there's just no time. But also I don't really want to be away from her. You know, she's already in daycare 4 days a week. So, like, when she's home, I want to be present, right? And then, so yes, that's been the biggest change of, like, I remember when I was pregnant with her being like, I just can't wait to get back to work. Like, why? Like, I'm going to miss work. I just wasn't prepared for how I would actually feel once she was born, which was the opposite. I was like, I actually never want to work again. Which thankfully went away, that feeling. But, you know, in the first 6 months after she was born, I just thought, like, this is the worst.
Yeah, but it is funny how things can really change if you have kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 8-year-old. I'm pregnant with my first kid. My boss was like, yeah, we'll see what happens when you get back. I mean, how much, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to come back to exactly the same thing. I don't want anything to change. What are you talking about? And then I had a kid. And a year later, I was like, yeah, I'm going to move away from Stockholm. I'm going to quit my work. I'm going to start freelancing instead. So, yeah, things change. And you can't, like, predict how much is going to change. Maybe nothing will change, but maybe everything will change. So you don't know how you are going to feel on the other side. So you need to stay really open to...
my highest...
Yeah.
Yeah, and any pregnant friends, I say that, I'm like, don't make any big decisions before the baby comes, because, yes, exactly that. You can suddenly want to move or, like, change jobs or not go back to work. Like, literally anything can happen, and you don't want to feel guilty because you've become, like, a different version of yourself, when really that's actually the biggest part of becoming a parent and becoming a mother, is, like, you everything about you kind of changes and then reforms. Like, I'd like to say I've, like, come back, which is why it's a bit frightening going into it a second time. but I also feel like more prepared for it this time. I think, that like that everything breaks apart but kind of gets glued back together in like some kind of sequence that looks semi-familiar.
Yeah, it does, and it can be a good thing because it forces you to take like a good 360 view of your life and really like start to evaluate decisions that you've made and your life situation. So I totally agree with you, and I was in a similar situation. I was a librarian when I got pregnant with my first kid, and then I was like, I'm not going back to librarian ever. It's the most boring job. So I went did my dream job, which was becoming a journalist. So I went back to journalist school in my 30s, like studying with people that was like 10 years younger than me. And now, of course, 30 doesn't feel so old when we're saying it now, but back then I felt like I was really going back to school, because it kind of like, and I also have friends now that also are having kids, and I see the same thing. As you say, you make pivots, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, sometimes we need to have something happening to us to make us revisit, and because it's so easy to just keep going, and maybe you have this nagging feeling of something is not quite right, but you don't want to really like take it in, because that means you have to make pivots, and that can also be really difficult. And is to bring back to your journey as well, because you have had to make some decisions. Because one of the things that I'm really curious to talk more about, which you were quite an early adapter of the community business model, where you, besides from offering patterns, you also offer like a subscription service where you're able to take part of sewing projects and learn from you in a more direct manner. Which I think was called Curated, right? Am I correct? Yeah. So, correct. And can you just tell us a little bit about that journey and when you started and the kind of business model behind that? Because I think that's really interesting, because right now everyone is talking about do a membership thing, do a community thing, and so I'm really interested to hear your experience and like thoughts around that and what you've learned from it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I had the idea like in around 2020 when, well, a few things happened. Like I used to make sewing patterns in collaboration with Peppermint magazine, and I was doing that on a quarterly basis. And from doing that, I learned like that having that structure was really good for me. Prior to that, like sometimes it was only a part-time business at that point. I was running it, outside of working. But I'd like release a pattern in a year because I was being just like so pedantic and such a perfectionist, and again, I didn't have a team, so no one was pushing me to release anything. But when I was working with Peppermint, I had these strict deadlines, and I just somehow managed to get it done. So I was kind of interested in that. And then at the same time, I'd like started a weekly newsletter called the Q&A series, which we still run, where I would answer community questions. And I just became really interested in that like community connection, because I realized like one person's question actually can help a lot more people, rather than me sitting here thinking, I know someone might want a tutorial on, I don't know, French seams or whatever, right? And just create it. Whereas when people were actually asking me, I found it quite interesting, because there would be like specifics to a question that I would never have thought to cover in a tutorial, I guess. So it took like a year, I want to say, to like come up with the idea. I hired an assistant, so she was my first hire. But I will say it was just so difficult at the time, because there weren't many things like it, that it was just really hard, and it became something it shouldn't have been, I want to say. Like, originally I just wanted to be like a paid newsletter, similar to Substack, but Substack wasn't really, I don't know if it had started then, but it definitely wasn't on my radar.
I don't think it was a thing anyways, back then.
Yeah, and that was more kind of where I was interested, that I wanted like community, I wanted learning. But the things that were around, or the only thing that was around, was like seam work, right? And so suddenly it morphed into, it's going to be a project a month, which probably from the outset was too big. But it did force me, like the Peppermint collaboration, like I got really good at releasing projects every month. Like I had a timeline, I churned content out, like I got really good at like the process. I got a really strong team around me. So I learned loads. but I'm an over deliverer. So that was probably like, that was a big problem. And I started before I had my daughter. And I always had this idea I had to give more than, I don't know, more than, I don't know who I was comparing it to. But the projects would get very big, they'd get very involved. The promise was always on skill building, which is something that I still find really interesting. Like, I never just want to create a pattern. I'm really interested in like what people learn from it and what sets it apart from like other things that are available. Because if you look around, like every pattern's been kind of made at this point. So you kind of have to do something different. And to actually have a community, that was also a last minute decision. Like, it was as we were about to launch, I was like, oh, maybe we should have an actual platform where people can speak. And that turned into like the best part of the whole thing. Like, I loved connecting with my community. I love like having actual conversations with actual people and seeing where they were struggling and coming up with future content, like future projects based on where people were struggling was really exciting. It was also what made my business finally like financially sustainable, because having a subscription meant, you know, you have an idea of how much income is coming in. You have customers who are very loyal, who are paying month by month. So it really allowed me to grow it. It was like soon after that I could quit my part-time job and do In the Folds full time. But then, as you know, I decided last year to end it for like many reasons, but the main one was just like I was burnt out and just felt like I couldn't keep up the standard that I wanted to keep doing if I kept going. But I also, like, as I've mentioned, like sustainability is super important to me, and I was like, what else can I produce like without it being a waste? I guess I just felt like all the big projects that I'd wanted to set out to do, we'd done. Things like sewing jeans, we'd sewn jackets, we'd sewn linings, we'd sewn silks, pattern hacking, like we'd cut. The only thing I didn't do was like swimwear or underwear, which I would have liked to do in collaboration with someone, because that's not my specialty. And that's like the only like major thing we didn't kind of tick off. But I felt like we had a project for everything, and it was almost like it had just run its course, I guess. And I wanted to end it on a high note. Like, I would have hated to end it and people being like not getting anything out of it anymore.
Do you think that if you had, you know, I know that you hired someone, but if you had been like a more of a team situation, do you think it would have been possible to keep going? Because was it also the fact that you were mainly in charge of it yourself? Is that also part of it? Because I imagine, because you put a lot of pressure onto yourself delivering monthly content, especially also when you're also starting a family and, you know, working with a small team. I can imagine that there are some months you're like, oh, what shall I come up with now? And how will I be able to like produce this? Because this is the deal that we have, you know, that's you subscribe, I deliver content, but I'm also a person and I also have other things going on in my life. So the safety net of ensuring the consistency, I can imagine that can be quite stressful if you have that kind of model and you're running it mostly yourself.
Yeah, and that was probably the first little thing that like started my brain wondering if it was right. Was Alice, who was my assistant, who I hired in 2020. She started Curated with me, and her and I just work together very, very well. We're like, we have very complementary kind of skills, and she's much more strategic. She can really just like kind of smash work out. I'm an overthinker, but she's very confident to tell me like when to stop, when is enough, to pull back. Like, she would always be saying we're like overdoing this and it will stress people out, right? Like, people don't need this much content, because that was also the other thing is like, it's not just about how much work I'm doing. It's like people getting this much content, they like have jobs and lives too. Like, they're not just sewing waiting for this content, right? So there was that. And she is British and was in Australia, but then she went back to the UK. So she finished up working with me. And that, like, I had other people on my team, but she was she was basically like very much like, I didn't feel like she was under me. I felt like we were like working always, you know, on the same kind of level. And that was probably the start of realizing that I was relying on her, and without her, it just, well, it also wasn't enjoyable. Like, it felt like I was just making it through, but I wasn't enjoying it in the same way. Whereas with her, we had the back and forth. She would come up with ideas, I'd come up with ideas. And suddenly I felt like I was kind of alone in that position of like having to come up with stuff, and then it would filter down to my other employees rather than like having a dialogue, I guess. So,
yeah, that's interesting, because you basically phased that out, right, by the end of last year, Curated. So now you are starting not fresh, because you still have your sewing pattern business running, and you still sell. Do you plan to release more sewing patterns this year, or what? Because you just said you're having a baby as well, but are you planning to keep on releasing sewing patterns, or what's your thought around that?
So yes, but probably not this year. That was the other thing. When I was realizing that Curated was coming to an end, I was thinking about my own wardrobe, and I was thinking about how like anything I would want to sew, I actually have a pattern for now in our back catalogue. And that's like great, but it also means like I'm not going to design another pattern until it makes sense, right? Until it actually belongs and it's worth producing. And like, as you said, I wrote recently about the cost of releasing a pattern. By the way, it's probably not correct. Like, I had a lovely customer who's an accountant reach out, and she spent some time with me to run through it more, to try and understand more how it actually works. And she basically laughed and said I had no idea, which I don't. And so it's made me a bit more nervous, right? To like produce patterns when now I actually know how much it costs me. And so, yes, I would like to produce patterns, but this new thing that I'm working on is more a way to like explore wardrobes and my own process. And I imagine in that process, some holes will come up, and then that would be an obvious place to add a pattern, I think. But right now, if I just sat and thought about what in the folds is missing, there's actually nothing, because like I try to design like timeless things, so I'm not following trends. So patterns I designed, 10 years ago still feel relevant to me, and which is great, but it means like you kind of hit this point where it's like, oh, there might actually be enough for now.
Yeah, so that brings us to your new launch, right? Which is called Making Again, right? Which you launched on Substack. So that's a very interesting way also of reaching out and using Substack as a way to, I guess, monetize and create new things in terms of sewing. So can you tell us a little bit about the process? Because in the fall you started like thinking, I need to find a more sustainable business model. I need to find something that I can work with, having a family, and get that energizes me again. So I'm really curious about how long you thought about and what your thoughts were, and also of course what Making Again is entails.
Well, I think, the other thing about Curated that I haven't mentioned that was also burning me out was like, as you said, I started quite early. It meant that the back end of it was awful. Like the technology that was running it was kind of pieced together, and it was just so painful to use. And at the beginning it was working fine, but as our subscribers grew, like one little issue became a much bigger issue when you're dealing with like hundreds of people, right? So it was like there was always just something, and I was spending a lot of time trying to figure that out, but there was no way I could move platforms. Like you kind of can't do that mid something, right? You're going to lose so many subscribers. It's going to be confusing. The messaging is hard. So you
also have to migrate all the people to a new platform and hope that they will come along and don't hate the new interface and like, I'm out.
Yes, and you also have to hope that you'll like it as well, because often you can't give stuff a go until you're doing it. And that's what happened. Like when we started Curated, everything was working fine, but as time went on, it was not working fine. So that was part of, like, when I started using Substack and I realized that you could do a paid tier on Substack, it just felt like so nice to think that all of that could be handled by one platform that was designed to do it. So yeah, there's that. But the actual idea of making again kind of came very organically, in that I'd started my Substack. I was just writing about creativity, motherhood, sewing, whatever. But I realized I wasn't sewing anymore. Like, I wasn't actually making. And so it started me questioning, like, which is where the name comes from, like, how can I start making again? And, like, not just making, but, like, enjoying it. Because that was the other part. Like, I was sewing for work and I was putting samples together, but I wasn't enjoying it at all. And it felt like a chore. And I wasn't sewing for myself. So I started just playing with that idea, and I just did like these, I was calling them in my head just like experiments, to be like, if I do this, does this feel? And if I do that, how does that feel? And just realizing that just like taking the pressure off and seeing it as an experiment was really helpful. Like, what about I make a pair of pants and just, if I wear them, great, but if I don't, like, I'll just donate them to charity and someone else will wear them, right? And just really taking that pressure off. And over time, I also, like, as I realized Curated was coming to an end, like, the community part of it is the best bit. Like, it really is. And I had people being like, oh, what am I going to sew now? I was like, you're right. Like, they weren't necessarily wanting a project a month, but they were wanting that guidance, that system, that support around them. And that's the bit that I love. I love the geeky questions we get in our community and the stuff people are asking. And so that's when I realized, like, I didn't want to go, I'll say, just make patterns. It's like, obviously making patterns is huge and takes a huge amount of time. But that wasn't the bit that was exciting me anymore. It was like the actual community around it and the support and, like, yeah. And I guess the other thing I realized were I've had people a lot over the years come forward and say, like, I'd love to be your customer, but I'm not. Like, your style of pattern maybe isn't for me. Like, I design quite boxy, quite oversized things with kind of interesting shapes. And people would be like, I love what you do. I want to make your patterns, but, like, I want a fit and flare dress, or I want something, you know, I'm never going to design that. Like, I just know that. But I would love to be able to support people to make those kind of things. So making, again, the premise is, like, you don't have to use In the Folds patterns. It's more, you'll get a playbook that gives you some prompts and some experiments, and then you can do whatever you want with it. So I'm really excited about that aspect, that everyone would be working on something completely different, but with the same, like, energy and intention behind it, I guess.
I think that's also very smart too, because then you also can broaden your customer group. It doesn't have to, as you say, be the ones that are specifically like your specific style, but it could be anyone instead. But have you started it already, or is it in the making, or what's the status of it?
So that's what I was going to say, that I can't particularly completely define what it is, because just like Curated became something else once it was launched. So making again, it was supposed to come out last Friday, and then I ran into just a back end issue that I couldn't charge GST, which is a tax here in Australia, which I had thought would be like a really simple thing to do on the back end, but you have to speak to a human at Substack, and speaking to a human at Substack actually took longer than I thought. So I'm in limbo, and I think it will go live this week. I hope it goes live this week, but everything's done. So yeah, as you both know, it's like very nerve-wracking when you're about to launch something new and you're not sure if anyone's interested. And you just have to trust, you know?
Yeah, and then that's the worst, when it's like a technical issue then with the taxes, and it's like, that should just work. I mean, it shouldn't be an issue of like running your business, like that, those kind of things. Like there needs to be, I don't know, some support, some help. Like, can that thing just run smoothly and I can focus on actually creating a great business idea, not how am I going to be able to pay the tax to each individual country or whatever. I mean, that's the reason why I'm still on Etsy, because it's just so much easier. I don't have to deal with any different tax to different countries. It sounds like a nightmare. So those kind of like business technical payment things, like it just needs to work. We shouldn't be have to dealing with those kind of things. And we can't be the first one who has this issue.
Exactly. And of all the things, like I had this like list of a million things that I needed to do for the launch. It was just a tiny little check GST, you know, it wasn't, I didn't think it would be like this thing that would slow down the launch or be, you know, a problem. So there was, so it came as a surprise. And as you both mentioned when we had a quick chat before we started recording, is like you both have read, I just came clean basically to my community about it, because we, you know, had dropped hints that something was coming. We'd put a launch day. There was even an Instagram post that said like coming the 16th of January. And then the 16th of January came and we couldn't launch. And I suddenly just wanted to write about it, because as you both know, like these things happen. And as a business owner, like, I don't know, it's so frustrating when it's not something you did, I guess. And it's like, you just want to, I don't know, I just wanted to talk about it. And so yeah, I wrote about it and I published a Substack about it, and it was really nice, like people's replies. Like it felt very well, you know, like I've always said, like I'm not saving lives with what I do. So like these deadlines are flexible. It's not like there's not that much on the line. So I have to remind myself of that when I'm feeling stressed about it. Is like, and also I set a date at random. Like it's like things can change, but you also sometimes feel like it's the unprofessional thing to do, right? So like to have to pivot kind of publicly or just not do what you said. So I think talking about it kind of feels better, to be like, this is what I'm doing and this is why it happened, I guess.
Yeah, and we're very similar in this podcast as well, and it feels very relieving in a way. It makes a more pleasant experience to run a business, because we share all the stuff, you know. And I mean, I'm very open. I've just been revising all my sewing patterns, going over them. It's been a long time coming, you know, looking back at the stuff you did 7 years ago, like 8 years ago. Maybe there are some improvements. I'm not the same person, and the level of, and like being honest, okay, I discovered lots of typos. Like I said that you should get 80 meters of elastic for the waistband. I mean, the good thing is the typo was so insanely instead of centimeters, but still I felt like, oh, shouldn't have said that. Does that say that I'm not great at proofreading my own patterns? But on the other hand, I feel like it's so nice, because I think everyone, you know, knowing us here, or us three, knows that the reality is that we are doing most of the stuff. So hence why sometimes things doesn't work out, you know, as a way it would have done in a big business. And I think that's really nice to be honest about, because hopefully that means that, and to be honest, I mean, I think we all have done a fabulous job of achieving so much and just being like a person that is into clothing. Like, had to learn all the other stuff. Like, we didn't go to business school, and all the like understanding finances and how to set up VIT collections and all those things, and we managed to do that. We managed to run a business, and we have not been caught by the government of, you know, some financial fraud. We have kept ourselves like straight, and I think that's really a beautiful thing. And so that's why it's nice to be open about this stuff, that it's challenging sometimes to run and this kind of business. It's fun, but it's way more complicated, I think, than a lot of people can comprehend, especially because we will also deal with international situations, and we hope that can change, you know, from from the day to another, basically. So we have no idea what the future holds, because we cannot just rely on our home market as well.
No, exactly. It's so hard. And yes, I think when I tell people what I do, they imagine I'm sewing all the time, but like I'm not on my machine much. I'm at my computer, right? Like I'm dealing with a million other things, and the pattern making is actually such a small percentage of what I do. And that bit's easy, you know, like that bit I can do without thinking too much. And as I said, during Curated, like I got really good at the process of creating the patterns. So it wasn't that would flip me up. It's like these admin things that would be like, oh, there's a glitch on the website, and for some reason it's doing this instead of this. And then, yeah, that is a whole day gone just like trying to figure something out and Googling, and then working out whether you need to hire a contractor to help, and like how serious is this, and how many customers has it affected. Yeah, it's hard.
And I think it's really good to be transparent about that, as well as I think we all are. I mean, we use this podcast a little bit as therapy as well, and like how to deal with these things. But if you are a customer and you don't have your own business, you can't imagine what all kinds of different things you need to deal with. Annoying things like doesn't have anything to do with pattern making or sewing, but everything else. I mean, just making a website, having your, those kind of things that you need as well, that it takes so much time. And I personally find it really interesting when other businesses share, like you get to peek behind the curtains, like what is actually happening. I love when people are transparent like that, because that makes it so much more interesting and also relatable. Like, okay, I understand now why it's been a delay in the launch or something. Like, totally understand it then, and I'm looking forward to the actual launch then. Well, if you didn't know it, then maybe you would think it's unprofessional to not launch at the day that you said. But now it's like, okay, now I understand. Then no problem at all. I'm rooting for you. So I think being transparent,
that's true.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of our beautiful customers who's like, I know, like as soon as I saw her name, I was like, she's been part of Curated, she's bought patterns prior to that, like, and she was just like, your humanity is what has like kept this business interesting to me. And it's like, it's a good reminder when people just say that, right? That like, you know, no one's actually expecting perfection, and we're like real people, and our customers are real people. And it's kind of hard to show your humanity through a screen. Like if you were running a store, you would show your humanity, right? Like you would be making jokes and you would be saying, I'm having a really hard day, and you would connect. But we're doing it like on platforms and also to a lot of people as well. So it's like, there's this balancing act of like not wanting to feel like you're exposing too much, but also wanting to show like that you're an actual person and you're being thoughtful and intentional, whether it works or not, right? Like you can't always predict this stuff. Like when we were closing Curated, we like I thought we'd listed everything we had to do to make sure this like would end gracefully. And, you know, our biggest fear was that the subscription would run and everyone would be charged again with no product. So, like, that bit was fine, that turned off. But then when I turned it off, I didn't think about there was going to be an automatic email coming from somewhere that told people that they had cancelled their subscription, and if they wanted to re-sign up, they could. And it was like the 31st of December, and suddenly the inbox is getting flooded with people saying, like, what? And I was like, It's like you don't get a dress rehearsal for these things. And it was so obvious after it happened that of course I should have checked for that and updated that email to make sense. But it just didn't occur to me. And I just felt like I'd been really conscious of it being smooth and communicating with our community. And then suddenly like this happens, and yes, I quickly wrote an email that I sent out to everyone explaining that I'd made the mistake. But it's not ideal, basically.
No, it is. But that is it's also easy, I think, to compare, because, I mean, you and I, Emily, we started around the same time, and before that, there were a couple of companies that were kind of taking it off, going to that next level. I would not claim that any sewing company is big, but relatively in that way that they were able to quite quickly to hire a team, whereas maybe you and I, for instance, have been running most of it self. Sometimes you it was also interesting to hear that it took so long for you to be able to actually start hiring and feeling financially secure. It was a long time coming for you as well, and I would say that you are well known and established, but again, realities of the fact that you had a part-time job as well, supporting yourself, and so but it's also like when you get that perspective, you kind of, to me, I fall into that trap regularly, that I kind of look at the companies that had like a pretty steep rise in the beginning and was able to take themselves to that next level with smart decisions and like the right time at the right place and great branding and all the things, and then you're like, and it's hard. I find myself often trying to model myself on those business model, the way they present their information and all the, the website and everything like that. And I'm like, but they have team and they also have more revenue. I mean, they have more money to hire like a web designer. Whereas for me, I do it myself. I do my own web page. So that's a little bit tricky, I think, to sometimes, at least I struggle with that. Have you feelings like that as well, Emily, where you're like, but they do it?
Always.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever once compared my business to an equivalent business, which is silly. Like, that's basically as small as mine, but the revenue mine has. Like, I'm always looking at exactly those brands that you're talking about that started around the same time as us or a little bit before, that have big teams, big revenue. I'm always exactly looking at their website, looking at their comms, looking at how they do things, but they are not one person operations. Like, they have big teams, they're in big spaces, they've got like, a completely different system. And I'm very guilty of that. Like, I don't know. I never look to the smaller businesses, but I should, because I would feel good. I would feel validated, and I wouldn't be spending my time wondering why my website doesn't look like theirs, like it's,
Yeah,
it's
the comparison trap is, it's real. And I mean, in the evening when I doom scroll on Instagram, it's like, I don't want to scroll on my own Instagram, I mean the Hazelhen Instagram, because then that comparison trap is like, oof, I get bad ideas, like how much I should be doing. Then it's more like, okay, then I'm gonna scroll about gardening instead, because that's my hobby. And now I want to enjoy myself. Now it's me time in the evening. Like, then I don't want to think about business ideas and what I should be doing. It's like, you have to separate those two sometimes. And maybe not compare yourself to everyone on Instagram. It's not healthy.
No, and you always see like, because the algorithm serves you, and you always will see like the most successful content, and that can also give you like a skewed idea. And also, I mean, the fact that when you and I started, Emily, it was, the indie sewing pattern community was definitely on a roll, I would say. So back then it was a little bit easier to get like some kind of like baseline exposure in that way. And the community was small but very supportive. So I think for a lot of people, you were able to like get into that next level quite quickly. But then I noticed that it was pretty easy to get stuck at that spot. And then when you realize that there are so many other companies out there right now, and you have to like, where is my place in this growing business? And you also see, because maybe it's my algorithm, because when I go into my own Instagram account, I lost it, and now I see a lot of posts about sewing pattern companies shutting down or pivoting. So maybe it's probably because I stay at those posts because I'm very interested in that topic. But and then some of these posts, they are not served for me by the companies I follow, but and I'm like, I haven't even heard of this sewing pattern company, and now they're closing. And I'm like, that's give you perspective on how many there are out there, and trying to figure out what a way to make this financially sustainable. And it's and as you talk about in the economics of running a sewing pattern business, you have to have a decent amount of customers or buyers, because we work with low cost product, so we need volume, and that's tricky in a fairly niche hobby, all things considering, unless you compare it to like cooking or gardening. I mean, we are still operating in a smaller niche where there's a market cap for sure. So those things are like always on my mind, and I don't know how you, what have your thoughts about that, you know, watching this evolution of the sewing business from when you started and to where you're now?
I think, yes, I've been noticing that and seeing those posts as well. I think around the time of COVID and after, like, there was this narrative that creating sewing patterns, digital sewing patterns, are free, you know, because you can do it on software that's relatively cheap. There were courses, or there are courses, I assume there's still courses showing you how to do it. There are some brands that are successful based on someone who learned to sew and then became a pattern maker. So there are some stories of it happening. So I think it like disillusioned people. You know, people thought, oh, I can start a company, and they're like, they didn't have any idea how much work went into producing the pattern, and then they're like, it's free money, you know. But it's
Passive
not,
income.
as we know. Yes, passive income. Like, there's nothing passive about producing sewing patterns and selling them digitally, right? Like, as we've talked about, even when it's up online, like, you still have all the things around it that need to be done to make that business run. So I think that's what we're seeing now, is like those people who the last few years were trying to take their hobby into a business are struggling. But also there's just so many people. Like, so I do think there is room for everyone, but you really have to stick at it, right? And work hard at it if you want to stand out or get your, you know, your pattern sold. Also, like, we're not rolling in cash, you know. It's not like something that you suddenly get really rich from doing. So I would say that would be the other aspect, is like, I don't know, maybe people thought they were going to be selling like thousands of patterns a week, and therefore they would be making great money. But speaking from my experience, like, I earn a living wage, but I'm not like, you know, I'm not making a heap of money from this. I'm not in it for the money. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah. And our first episode was actually called "Sewing Won't Make Us Rich," because
So you agree?
Unfortunately, yes. But this
still true.
Yes, still true. But making again, have you sorted things out now behind the scenes? Are you how is the, where are you now? Are you ready to launch, or will it take some time still?
I think it's ready to go. I just had one more question for Substack about like an accounting thing. So I'm waiting. I don't even know where they're based, but it's obviously not in my time zone. So I'm getting, you know, waking up first thing and checking my email and getting a reply, and then realizing I have another question. But I would say by this Friday, so it's Tuesday now, by Friday, so just 1 week late, I'll be ready to launch. And as my assistant said, like, it was probably good. Like, we were really running up until the deadline, and this week gave us an extra buffer. And I was like, it was very sweet. I had some people who had already pledged. So on Substack, you can pledge to say, if you monetize this Substack, I will pay. So I had some people who had pledged already. So when I turned it on to check things were working, and then realized this issue, there were a few people who had pledged. And one woman, you know, asked a few questions, and they were great questions. So it was like good that I had time to like add it to the FAQs, and, you know, because often you don't know what's going to confuse people when it's your product. You know it so well, it's so obvious to you. But then some questions are so obvious that you think, like, how didn't I think that someone was going to ask that? Like, it's, of course they're going to ask that. Like, the question was like, where does making again fit? Like, am I signed up to the right thing? Is Beyond the Folds making again? And how is that in relation to In the Folds? And it's like, yes, that's confusing if I don't spell that out. Like, to me, it's really obvious how these brands sit alongside each other. But, like, you know, like my customers are getting bombarded with 1 million brands a day. So it's like I can't, so things like that are helpful, I think. So I'm taking this week as like a good chance to, make sure I've done what I can. But of course on Friday there'll be more things, things will go wrong and I will have things I've overlooked, but I'm much better now at just going with it and just being like, it is what it is. What can we do now to fix this? And I think I'm good at like just thinking, what does my customer need, instead of like worrying about how I look or whether it's embarrassing for me or, and I think that's probably the best thing as a business owner, to just be like, what does my customer need right now? Because in most cases, if you're just honest or apologize, people are going to be kind, right? Like sewing people are lovely people in general.
Absolutely, yeah. Very, very understanding. And that's the best part, I think, about running a business in this space, that it is so familiar and understanding, and because of the personal relationship that you have, people understand a lot more, and they're very supportive and also good at like spreading the words. And we should also say now that I'm pretty sure that, because we always batch record, so when this episode is out, we'll definitely your making again will also be out, and we're going to link, of course, in the show notes. So yeah. Otherwise we'll wait to release this episode until you give us the thumbs up. So, but that's great. That's what we say, we are doing this podcast when we're in the midst of things, not when we tied everything up in a pretty bow. So now you're like trying to get all the things sorted behind the scenes, and it sounds like you also had like a good now to like tweak the offer, and and I think that's also good, because when you launch something new, it takes a little bit to like formulate it clearly, and it's not really until people are starting to asking about it, that's where you're able to like really finalize what is the offer and what am I doing now. And so it's very good to have that kind of back and forth to really make sure that you hit that sweet spot. And I'm sure in 6 months' time, making again will maybe not be exactly the same as it launched, because due to the feedback and your whatever feels right, it's going to be, something different and even better. I mean, that's a beautiful thing when I
actually hope that's the case. Like I think, and that was another appealing thing about the platform I've used, and the approach to it is like, I wanted to be flexible. I felt like the curated offer was so clear. It was like, you will get a project a month. This is the expectation. Whereas I wanted this to be a lot more flexible and a lot more of a conversation with our customers about like, what are you actually struggling with right now? And I realized like so many people are struggling with the exact same thing, right? Like we are all exhausted, we all are time poor, and we all just feel like we can't fit this hobby in around our actual lives. And so that was like the kind of a pain point I wanted to like go after, was like, how do we like integrate making into our lives without it feeling stressful, or like, when you feel guilty, you're like, oh, I haven't done that thing, or I have too much fabric, or I have too many patterns and I don't sew. Like it's not productive. It doesn't feel good for anyone. And then you end up having like dread about your hobby, which is like the opposite of what it's supposed to be doing, right? Your hobby is like meant to be your self-care, and where you feel good about yourself and can disconnect. And I think I was feeling like that, and then I was like, oh wait, my customers are feeling the exact same way. So it's like I can really hone in on that, because I feel like I've been living it.
It's very, I think this is a super interesting pivoting, and I think you're definitely onto something. And because as we talked about previously, people crave connection, but there's also this overwhelm, and being able to offer something a little bit more different from, say, okay, this is the pattern we're going to sew. And it seems more that you just want to be a catalyst for other people's creativity, rather than trying to mold into a specific project where you have to follow a specific template. And I think that's really interesting and a beautiful, no pressure way of being creative in your sewing space. I think I'm super excited to hear more about this in the future and what's going. And of course, again, we will definitely link to your Substack. It's Beyond the Folds Substack on Substack.com. Are there other ways that people can connect with you and catch up
Yeah,
with
so
what
just
you're
my-
doing?
Yeah, just my website, so inthefolds.com, and then on Instagram we're in the folds, and then Substack is Beyond the Folds, which basically is just like the behind the scenes, the convergence of all these things of like small business, motherhood, creativity, which in the folds I sometimes talk about, but in the folds is more like the polished side of the brand. So yeah, I like the way these two kind of things speak to each other and complement each other. And I think for some people they're only checking in the folds content, and other people are more interested in Beyond the Folds, and some people like both. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, we're very, very honored to have you on, and I will also thank you for a beautiful conversation. And I think a lot of our listeners will really enjoy this, lifting behind the scenes and hearing all your story, and also, of course, talking about what's next for you. And we're really, really excited to follow you along. So thank you, Emily, for being our first ever guest on the Stitching Tales podcast.
Thank you. It was so great. And I appreciate both of you being so honest and getting rid of all the small talk and actually talking about this stuff, I think is really important for everyone, right? In our community, in our industry, it's like, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are trying to do what we're doing, or are doing what we're doing, and feeling completely alone. And I think by actually talking about it, you realize we're all in the same boat. Like, we're all struggling with these silly tax issues, or websites that don't work, or whatever it is this week. We're all like doing it together.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So again, thank you so much, Emily. And thank you so much for listening. Of course, remember to check the show notes for all the details about what Emily is doing and how to get in touch with her. I am Johanna Lundström of The Last Stitch.
And I am Malena Hjerpe of Hazelhen Patterns. And Emily, you send us out. Perfect. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.